The sun rose gently over the small town of Abeokuta, casting a golden glow over the modest but luxurious compounds that dotted the landscape. Despite the town's quiet elegance, there were pockets of struggle hidden behind its beauty. In one of the older streets, a small bungalow stood, its walls worn by time but filled with love and dreams. Inside that house lived Amaka, a young nurse with big dreams and an even bigger heart. Amaka's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Okafor, had poured everything they had into her education. They were not wealthy, but they believed that education was the key to breaking free from the chains of poverty. Every morning before the sun fully awoke, Mrs. Okafor would set out to the market, selling vegetables to make ends meet, while Mr. Okafor worked as a security guard in a bank. Their lives were simple but filled with hope that Amaka would one day bring them a better life. Amaka had just completed her nursing school and secured a job at the local hospital. Though the pay was not much, it was a start. She had always dreamed of helping people, of making a difference in the world. The hospital was small but busy, with patients coming in from different parts of town. Some had minor injuries, others battled life-threatening diseases, and then there were those who carried secrets deeper than any wound could reveal. Despite the low-paying job at the village hospital, Amaka had managed to support her family in ways most people would think impossible. Her parents, though hardworking, had limited means, and her younger siblings still needed schooling and care. Amaka did everything she could to ensure they had what they needed. Every day, she worked long hours, tending to patients, cleaning wounds, and making sure that the hospital's resources were well managed, even though the pay was meager. Life wasn't easy, and there were countless days when Amaka felt exhausted, both physically and mentally. But despite the hardship, she never complained. She was determined to make sure her family would have a better future. She had grown up watching her parents sacrifice so much for her education, and now it was her turn to help her siblings. She made sure they had food, school supplies, and even paid for extra lessons to help them with their studies. Though the struggle seemed endless, Amaka held onto a flicker of hope. She knew there was something better out there, a chance for her to improve her life, to make her family proud. And one day, after coming back from a long day at the hospital, Amaka decided to open her saving box. The small wooden box was old, but it had served its purpose well. It was where Amaka had kept every little bit of money she had managed to save, no matter how small. She took a deep breath and slowly began to count the money, carefully placing each note in a neat pile. As she counted, Amaka's heart raced. The amount of money was more than she had expected. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to make a difference. It was the kind of money that could take her to the city she had always dreamed of. A city with opportunities, a place where she could work in a bigger hospital, and a decent salary, and perhaps, for the first time, live a life that wasn't marked by constant struggle. Amaka paused for a moment, staring at the money in front of her. She could already imagine what it would be like to leave the village, to step into the unknown and start anew. The thought of finding a better job, meeting new people, and making a fresh start filled her with both excitement and fear. But deep down, she knew this could be her chance to change everything, for herself and for her family. She had always dreamed of being more than just the nurse in the village hospital, more than just a daughter of hardworking but poor parents. She wanted to prove that with determination and courage, anyone could escape their circumstances. And this was the first step. With a sense of resolve, Amaka tucked the money back into her drawer, her mind already made up. She would leave the village. She would go to the city and search for a job, a new life. She had no idea what awaited her there, but she was ready to take the risk. Amaka smiled as she closed the drawer. It wasn't going to be easy, but she had come this far. She could handle whatever came next. And with that, she began to plan for the journey that would change her life forever. Amaka had spent countless nights thinking about her decision. The thought of leaving the comfort of her village, the warmth of her family, and the familiar faces she had grown up with made her heart ache. But the desire for a better life, for a future where she wouldn't have to struggle every day just to make ends meet, was stronger than the fear of the unknown. Finally, one afternoon, after finishing her shift at the hospital, Amaka sat down with her parents. The small room was quiet, save for the sound of the rustling leaves outside the window. Her heart pounded in her chest as she prepared to speak the words that had been weighing on her mind for so long. "Mama, Papa," she began, her voice steady but soft. "I've been thinking a lot about my future, and I believe it's time for me to go to Lagos. There are more opportunities there, better jobs, and I think I can earn more money to help all of us." Her parents looked at each other, their faces filled with a mixture of surprise, concern, and understanding. Amaka had always been the strong one in the family, the one who held everything together, so this decision wasn't easy for them to hear. Her father, a quiet man who had worked the land all his life, was the first to speak. "Amaka, my daughter, you've worked so hard. You've given us so much. But Lagos, it's a big city, and we don't know what might happen to you there. It's not easy." Tears welled up in Amaka's eyes, but she held them back. She knew her father only wanted to protect her, just as he always had. Her mother, ever the voice of reason, gently placed her hand on Amaka's. "We know you want more for yourself, and we've always believed in you. If this is what you truly want, we will support you. But promise us, Amaka, that you will be careful and stay safe. The city is full of opportunities, but it can also be dangerous." Amaka nodded, feeling a mix of guilt and relief. She had always been the one to care for them, to help them with everything, and leaving them felt like a betrayal. But she knew this was something she had to do, not just for her, but for all of them. "Thank you, Mama." "Papa," Amaka whispered. "I promise I'll be careful. I'll make you proud." The days that followed were filled with preparations. Amaka packed her few belongings, the couple of dresses, a worn-out pair of shoes, and the money she had saved. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get her started. Her parents gave her a small portion of their savings, urging her to take it, just in case she needed it. On the day she was to leave, the air was thick with emotion. Her siblings gathered around her, each of them with their own quiet wishes for her success. Amaka hugged them all tightly, feeling the love and support that would carry her through the hardest of times. She didn't know when she would be back, but she promised to visit when she could. The bus station was crowded, filled with people coming and going, each of them with their own story, their own reasons for traveling. Amaka's heart raced as she boarded the bus, the reality of her decision hitting her. The dusty road stretched out in front of her, leading away from the village she had known all her life. As the bus pulled away from the village, Amaka glanced out the window one last time. The hills, the trees, and the small houses faded into the distance. For the first time, she felt a sense of freedom mixed with fear. What awaited her in Lagos? Would she find a job? Would she be able to make it on her own in a city as big and bustling as Lagos? But as the bus rumbled along, Amaka clutched her bag tightly, filled with hope and determination. This was her chance, the chance to change her life and the lives of her family. She would face whatever challenges came her way, no matter how difficult they seemed. The journey from her quiet village to the busy city of Lagos was long, but Amaka didn't mind. She was ready to take the first step toward a new life, one filled with possibilities, and she knew that with each passing mile, she was getting closer to her dreams. Amaka's arrival in Lagos was everything she had imagined it would be: crowded, loud, and full of life. The streets were filled with people rushing in all directions, the air was thick with the noise of honking cars, and the tall buildings seemed to stretch up into the sky endlessly. For a moment, she stood still in the middle of the bustling streets, feeling both awestruck and overwhelmed by the scale of it all. But then, she reminded herself why she was here: to build a better future. With the little money she had left, Amaka sought out a small, cheap hotel. It wasn't much, but it was a roof over her head. She paid for a night, exhausted but grateful to have a place to rest after the long bus ride. That night, as she lay on the hard mattress, her mind raced with thoughts of the days ahead. She didn't know anyone in Lagos, but she was determined to make it. The next morning, she woke up early, with a fire in her heart. She had no time to waste. She quickly changed into her best clothes, which were simple but neat, and set out for the day, searching for job opportunities. She walked through the busy streets of Lagos, stopping by hospitals and clinics, asking around if they were hiring nurses. At each place, she was met with kind, yet discouraging words. "We don't have openings right now, or come back another time." Amaka didn't let the rejections discourage her. She knew this was part of the journey, part of the fight to build a better life. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Amaka's feet were sore, and her heart was heavy, but she never stopped trying. She knew her dream was within reach, and she couldn't give up now. The people she met along the way, some kind, some indifferent, had no idea how hard she was fighting for her future. They couldn't see the sacrifices she had made to get this far. But Amaka could feel it deep within her, she was getting closer to her goal. Then, after what seemed like an eternity of searching, Amaka got the call she had been waiting for. One of the hospitals she had applied to months ago finally had an opening. She could hardly believe it as she stood in the busy street, the phone pressed to her ear. It felt like a dream, but it was real. She had made it. Amaka was offered a job as a nurse at one of the hospitals in Lagos. The joy she felt was overwhelming. She had worked so hard, and now it was all paying off. She couldn't wait to call her parents and share the good news. They had been worried about her, but now, she would finally be able to send them the money she had promised, and more. She could already imagine their faces lighting up with pride. The next few years at the hospital were everything Amaka had hoped for. She was respected by her colleagues, loved by her patients, and paid well enough to take care of herself in Lagos. The first few months were tough, and she had to adjust to the fast-paced environment, but soon, she settled in. She found a small apartment in a quieter part of the city, and every month, she sent money back to her parents. She felt proud knowing that her hard work was making a difference in her family's life. But just as she was getting comfortable, just as everything seemed to be falling into place, a new opportunity appeared on the horizon. It was bigger than anything she had ever imagined. It was a quiet afternoon at the hospital, the kind of day when the usual rush had settled into a calm lull. Nurses moved quietly through the hallways, checking on patients, filling out reports, and going about their routine tasks. Amaka had just finished her rounds when a sleek, black luxury car pulled up outside the hospital entrance. The car was so pristine, so polished, that it caught the attention of everyone nearby. The car door opened, and out stepped a woman in her late 30s. She was dressed elegantly, her hair styled perfectly, and her demeanor was one of confidence and power. She was the kind of woman who commanded attention without saying a word. Amaka watched her as she walked towards the entrance, her heels clicking against the hospital floor. The woman was quickly escorted by the receptionist to the nurse's station, and Amaka, who was still at her desk, couldn't help but notice her. Something in the woman's stride, the way she carried herself, told Amaka that she was no ordinary visitor. Her curiosity was piqued. Minutes later, the woman approached her. The woman smiled softly, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I've heard a lot about you. You're known for your skill, your dedication. I need your help, Nurse Amaka." Amaka blinked, surprised. "Of course, I'll do whatever I can. How can I assist you?" The woman hesitated for a moment, her eyes flickering with uncertainty before she spoke again, her voice quiet, almost as if she were speaking more to herself than to Amaka. "I've been through a lot. My husband is a wealthy businessman here in Lagos. We have everything anyone could ask for: money, property, influence. But there's one thing that's been tearing us apart. We've had 4 daughters, and my husband. Well, he desperately wants a son. We've tried everything, but I'm unable to conceive again, and he's becoming more distant by the day. I need help. I need someone to carry my husband's child, someone who could be the son he's always wanted. Amaka was taken aback. She had heard of surrogacy before, but she never imagined it would come to her in this way. The situation seemed so surreal, so out of the ordinary, but she couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for the woman standing before her. The woman nodded, her face serious. Yes. I want you to carry my husband's child for us. I know it's a lot to ask, but I've heard you're trustworthy and capable. I'm offering you a significant amount of money for this, more than you could ever make in this hospital in years. Amaka felt a lump form in her throat. She had worked so hard to get where she was, and the thought of a large sum of money was tempting. But what the woman was asking her to do was no small thing. It was a life-changing decision, and she had to be certain she was doing the right thing. The woman looked at her with a soft sigh. I've heard of you, Nurse Amaka. I've heard about your dedication, your integrity, and your kindness. You're different from the other nurses here. I trust you. And besides, I believe you're someone who understands what it's like to fight for a better life. You've come from humble beginnings, and you've made it this far. You can do this for us. Amaka felt her heart racing. She had always dreamed of improving her life, of having enough to take care of her family without worry. But this was an offer she never could have imagined in her wildest dreams. The amount of money the woman was offering could change everything for her. She could send her siblings to school, help her parents retire, and live a life free of financial struggles. But at the same time, she felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility, of unease. This wasn't just a financial transaction, it was a decision that would affect lives, change futures, and create complicated ties. Carrying someone else's child was not just a matter of biology, it was an emotional journey, one that would leave a lasting impact on her and the family involved. Amaka looked at the woman, who was waiting for her response, her face a mixture of hope and desperation. I need some time to think about this, Amaka said softly, her mind racing as she tried to process everything. This is a huge decision. I can't just say yes without considering the consequences. The woman smiled, a flicker of relief crossing her features. Of course, take your time. I understand. But please know, I'm offering you a chance to change your life, Nurse Amaka. This is more than just a job, it's a way out. Amaka nodded, her thoughts swirling in a whirlwind of emotions. She had come to Lagos to find a better life, but now, the path before her had become even more complicated. She had to make a decision, a choice that would not only affect her future but also the future of a family she barely knew. As the woman turned and walked away, Amaka sat down heavily in her chair, her mind filled with uncertainty. What would she do? Would she accept the offer and take the opportunity to change her life forever, or would she refuse and continue the hard fight for her dreams in a different way? Amaka's mind had been racing for days, torn between the excitement of the financial opportunity and the weight of the emotional responsibility she was about to take on. The offer from the woman, Mrs. Olamide, had haunted her thoughts, and despite the initial reservations she had, a part of her couldn't ignore the life-changing impact it could have on her future and her family's well-being. It was a risk, a huge one, but she had always believed in fighting for a better life. The day Amaka finally called Mrs. Olamide to accept the offer, her hands trembled slightly as she dialed the number. Her heart thudded in her chest as she heard the woman's voice on the other end. I'm ready, Amaka said, her voice steady but carrying a hint of nervousness. I'll do it. I'm willing to carry your husband's child. There was a brief pause on the line before Mrs. Olamide's voice came through, filled with relief and gratitude. Thank you, Amaka. You don't know how much this means to me. We'll arrange everything. I'll make sure you're well taken care of, every step of the way. The next few days passed in a blur as Amaka met with Mrs. Olamide and discussed the details of the arrangement. Mrs. Olamide made it clear that she wanted to ensure everything was handled with the utmost care and professionalism. The hospital would provide all the necessary medical support, and she would be compensated well, not just for the surrogacy, but for the time and effort involved. Amaka had her doubts, but they were quieted by the fact that this was her only chance to improve her life. The financial package was more than she could have ever dreamed of. Mrs. Olamide had promised to cover all her medical expenses, as well as provide Amaka with a monthly stipend for her living expenses. And at the end of it all, there would be a substantial sum waiting for her. Soon after the agreement was made, the process began. Mrs. Olamide arranged for Amaka to undergo a series of medical tests and consultations. The clinic that would oversee the procedure was state-of-the-art, its walls lined with the latest equipment. Amaka couldn't help but feel a sense of awe when she first walked into the sterile, bright halls of the facility. She had never seen anything like it before. It felt worlds apart from the small, humble hospital where she had worked for the past few years. The day of the procedure arrived sooner than Amaka expected. She was escorted to a private room where the medical staff prepared her for the process. She was given a mild sedative to help her relax, though a part of her still felt the weight of what she was about to go through. But she pushed her worries aside. This was what she had agreed to, and she had to move forward. The procedure itself was brief. Amaka couldn't help but feel a bit out of place, lying on the hospital bed, her body hooked up to various machines while a team of doctors worked efficiently. They retrieved the sperm from Mr. Olamide and fertilized one of her eggs. Then, a few days later, they implanted the embryo into her uterus. When the procedure was complete, Amaka felt an overwhelming sense of exhaustion. She was told to rest and allowed to return to her apartment with a strict schedule of follow-up appointments. Over the next few weeks, she had to visit the clinic regularly to ensure everything was progressing smoothly. The anticipation of whether or not the procedure had worked weighed heavily on her. She was both excited and nervous about the possibility of carrying the Olamide's child. As the weeks turned into a month, Amaka began to feel the signs that her body was changing. The first doctor's visit confirmed what she had hoped for: she was pregnant. The embryo had successfully implanted, and the pregnancy was progressing as expected. Over the next few months, Amaka continued her work at the hospital, though her physical condition sometimes made it challenging. She felt different now, her body adjusting to the pregnancy, and with each passing day, the weight of her decision became more tangible. She would lay in bed at night, feeling the growing life inside her, and wonder about the family she was carrying a child for. Would they truly be grateful, or was this just a business transaction for them? Amaka also kept in close contact with Mrs. Olamide, who was overjoyed by the news of her pregnancy. The woman made sure Amaka was comfortable, sending her gifts and making sure she had everything she needed. But despite the comfort of the arrangement, Amaka couldn't shake the nagging feeling that the consequences of her decision were still unfolding, and that there was much more ahead of her than she had anticipated. The 9 months of pregnancy had flown by, each day marked by the growing life inside her. Amaka had carried the child with a mixture of emotions: pride, hope, and, at times, fear. As the final weeks approached, she couldn't help but feel both relief and anxiety. The day she had been waiting for had finally come. The delivery went smoothly, and Amaka couldn't contain her joy when she held the baby boy in her arms. The sight of his tiny fingers and his peaceful face filled her with a deep sense of accomplishment. Despite the complicated journey she had taken, she had done it, she had fulfilled her promise, and the Olamides were overjoyed. As promised, Mrs. Olamide ensured Amaka was well taken care of. Amaka was given the substantial sum of money that had been agreed upon, more than enough to change her life forever. She immediately sent a large portion of it to her parents in the village, knowing they would be both shocked and thrilled by the generosity. She imagined their faces as they received the money, their lives suddenly filled with hope. It was everything Amaka had dreamed of: financial security, the ability to help her family, and a future filled with possibilities. After receiving her pay, Amaka decided to treat herself. She had worked so hard, endured so much, and now, it was her time to enjoy the fruits of her labor. She went out for a night on the town, dressed in fine clothes, her hair styled beautifully, and her spirits high. For once, she didn't have to worry about money. She could live in the moment, bask in the lavish lifestyle she had long desired. She dined at a fancy restaurant, enjoying a meal that tasted of luxury, and let herself enjoy the attention she received from strangers who admired her newfound confidence. But after the night of indulgence, as the excitement of the evening faded, Amaka returned to her apartment, a little tipsy but happy. She locked the door behind her, feeling the comfort of her home, her small haven from the chaos of the city. She took a long, relaxing bath to wash away the weariness of the night and the stress of the past months. But as she stepped out of the bathroom, something went terribly wrong. Amaka felt a wave of dizziness rush over her. She tried to steady herself, but her vision blurred, and her legs buckled beneath her. She collapsed on the floor, her body crumpling in a heap. It was as if her body had given out after carrying the heavy weight of responsibility for so long. Time seemed to stretch on at that moment. She remained on the cold floor, unconscious and alone. Days passed. Amaka's neighbors grew concerned when they noticed she hadn't left her apartment. They hadn't heard from her in a while, and it was unlike her to be so quiet for so long. They knocked on her door, but there was no answer. They tried calling her phone, but it went unanswered. Something was wrong. Worried, one of her neighbors decided to go to the police. They explained their concern, and the officers agreed to check on Amaka. It wasn't long before a team of officers arrived at the apartment building. They knocked on her door, but still, there was no response. After receiving permission from the landlord, they broke down the door. Inside, they found Amaka lying on the floor of her bathroom. Her body was cold, lifeless, and her face showed no sign of the joy she had once carried in her heart. The officers immediately called for medical assistance, but it was too late. Amaka was gone. The news of her death spread quickly. In the days that followed, the police investigated her death, but they found no signs of foul play. It seemed that the combination of the stress, the physical toll of the pregnancy, and the emotional weight of the entire experience had taken a severe toll on her body. The doctors suggested that the collapse could have been caused by a sudden cardiac arrest, possibly triggered by the exhaustion and strain she had endured. Amaka's family in the village was devastated when they received the news. They couldn't believe that their daughter, who had worked so hard to improve their lives, was gone so soon. The money she had sent them had arrived just days before, and they had been planning how to use it to build a better future. Now, all they had were memories of the girl who had always dreamed of a better life for herself and her family. In the city, Amaka's friends and colleagues mourned the loss of a kind, hardworking woman who had been full of potential. She had come to Lagos with nothing, built a life from the ground up, and had finally achieved what so many could only dream of. But in the end, despite all her hard work, she was gone too soon. Her life had been short, but it was filled with purpose, sacrifice, and a love for her family that had pushed her to make difficult choices. Amaka had given everything for the hope of a better future, not just for herself, but for those she loved most. And though her story ended in tragedy, her legacy lived on in the lives she had touched and the dreams she had worked so hard to make a reality. Amaka's death left an indelible mark on everyone involved. It was a reminder of the fragility of life and how quickly things could change. And though her story had ended in sorrow, her spirit, the one that had fought so hard for a better life, would never be forgotten.